Part 49. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 481. Lu Zheng looked at the arrogant Lu Zioqi, and then at the aggrieved Wang Yanran, and did not come back to his senses for a long time. Finally, he hesitated to speak, but couldn't help but pulled Lu Zioqi aside and asked in a low voice, "This, Wang, ahem, Miss Wang is also your girlfriend?" Lu Zioqi shook his head. Just as Lu Zheng was about to breathe a sigh of relief, he heard Lu Zioqi say, "You can be considered my confidant." It is actually not an exaggeration to say that she is a confidant. Wang Yanran not only helped him treat his sister, but also guided him to completely cure her sister's illness and awaken her talent. She also helped him enter the academy to study, although he didn't actually learn much useful things because he grew up too fast. But the basic knowledge still filled in a lot. In the subsequent adventurer competition, the two cooperated to kill all the foreign Riyao, and then revealed their secrets to Lu Zioqi, and Fuzang's one-day trip and Lu Zioqi's tips when going to the Hell Dungeon. Wang Yanran has done so many things, so naturally Lu Zioqi always remembers them in her heart. Although this girl has a hot temper and arrogant personality, her heart cannot be deceived. What's more, Lu Zioqi opened something and could see clearly. Lu Zheng. But do you know how old this Miss Wang is and how strong she is? Lu Zheng couldn't help but ask. Lu Zioqi said seriously, "I know." He continued, "Age is not a problem, strength is not a gap, money is not an obstacle, as long as two people are in love, everything is just a cloud. Lu Zheng, I'll beat you to death today, you, this troublesome, disobedient son." Doraemon rolls up his sleeves. JPG. Lu Zioqi naturally saw the evil look on her father's face. But he could only smile bitterly. After all, what happened to Wang Yanran was a bit complicated and involved many issues. Just pick it up and you can talk about it for days and nights without stopping. But at this moment, Lu Zioqi could only make a long story short and sum it up in one sentence: she saved Wang Yi. Lu Zioqi omitted a lot, but simply said that Wang Yanran helped save her sister when she didn't have the talent to awaken and was suffering from a terminal disease. Lu Zheng's expression when he looked at the other party suddenly changed. But the look in Lu Zioqi's eyes was still very kind. On the other side, Lu Wanyi and Lu Xianxian also secretly chatted about Lu Zioqi. When Mother Lu secretly asked about their relationship, Lu Wanyi just lowered her head and blushed without saying anything. Lu Xianxian was seen beating her chest and sighing repeatedly. "Silly girl, you have to hurry up while that brat likes you. Hurry up and cook him some uncooked rice. He has no shortage of beautiful girls around him now," Lu Xianxian said earnestly. With her eyesight, she could naturally see that her girl was still in perfect condition. "At first, I thought it was because the two of them had a bad relationship and didn't get together, but now it seems that it was clearly Lang Yuking and concubine's intention." This set off alarm bells in her heart. After all, there are quite a few vixens around Lu Zioqi. Although she could also see that those girls had the same lack of substantial progress as her own girls. But she only thought that their feelings for each other had not yet developed to that point. After all, Lu is only 19 years old this year. It would indeed be a bit early to take a personal life. She, Lu Xianxian, naturally wanted to have a grandson, and she didn't mind that Lu Zioqi had multiple partners. But wouldn't it be better if this grandson was his own? Lu Wanyi's mouth moved and she whispered him as loudly as a mosquito. Lu Xianxian was so angry that she pulled her daughter and began to teach her her experience. Both she and Lu Zheng saw Lu Zioqi's abilities. He was able to clear the initial dungeon of the hell level and rescue two people, and he was able to suppress a big force without saying a word. This strength is at least the best at the Sun Yao level. As for the sun, sorry, she didn't think about it at all. As the old saying goes, good news should not flow to outsiders. Naturally, Such an outstanding son should be worthy of his own daughter. Besides, he was the child-in-law he brought home, and his girl is so charming. In short, even if Lu Wanyi can't have Lu Zioki all to herself, being a big lady is not too much, right? Therefore, Lu Xianxian began to whisper in Lu Wanyi's ear and teach her the secrets of charioteers. It just so happened that he had just stuffed a big guy in, and he was worried about how to place it. This is the place where they stopped and settled down for the first time after being hunted, escaped, and killed again. The sister's eyes were a little shy, but unexpectedly revealed firmness and passion. Naturally, she could see that few of the women living in the pure land of paradise had simple thoughts. Therefore, she has always been very shy and reserved, hiding her passionate love for her brother in her heart and not daring to show it too obviously. Secondly, Lu Zioki has almost become a crystal palace in the pure land of paradise, so it is really unexpected to have two parents suddenly come in. Lu Zioki had just explained things about Wang Yanran to her father when she felt Lu Wanyi's eyes falling on her. The shy and smiling look made Lu Zioki's heart tremble. He quickly averted his eyes and muttered in his heart, "I don't know what my mother told Wanyi." Home in the true sense of the word. In desperation, Lu Zioki had no choice but to send everyone to the pure land of ultimate bliss one by one. First of all, both of them are Lu Zioki's elders. It is not appropriate to sign a contract with him and become his subordinates. As for Lu's father and Lu's mother, he also took them in to see the city that belonged to Lu Zioki alone, but he did not sign a contract with them. But he had no chance to eavesdrop. He turned his head and happened to look at his sister affectionately. Lu Wanyi listened to Lu Xiangxian's words and deeds, and from time to time cast her eyes on Lu Zioki in the distance. Although the expression on her face was still shy, her eyes became more determined. But she still took everything Lu Xianxian said to heart seriously. Just enough to keep them busy. She is determined to face her heart and face this feeling bravely. Why do I think her expression doesn't look right? After staying in there for too long, I became unaccustomed to life outside. Lu Zioki naturally respected the choice of her adoptive parents and decided to take Lu Wanyi and her parents back home. It is the spiritual sustenance of Father Lu and Mother Lu. The third point is that even though the two elders faced Lu Zioki's city, they were amazed and amazed. But now with the support of her mother, Lu Wanyi seems to have confidence and full of fighting spirit. It's just that she is a little concerned about her identity in her heart. She and Lu Zioki are siblings, and she is afraid of the world's eyes. It's not that I have selfish motives, it's mainly that it's inappropriate. Because after everyone gathered together, everyone clamored to go back to the pure land of paradise. There is a question mark on their relationship with Lu Zioki. This made the untouched Lu Wanyi blush with embarrassment, and her head almost buried in her increasingly plump breasts. But she is not stupid. Not only is she not stupid, she is also very smart. Otherwise, she would not have been able to shoulder the important responsibility of supporting the family at such a young age. So, I guess everyone can guess a little bit about the next plot, right? After all, there are various buildings in the pure land of paradise, which provide very high bonuses for practicing or doing other things, and the environment inside is more than one level better than the outside world, not to mention under the control of the elves. Many tasks inside should be automated, and no one needs to worry about it at all. Staying there is like living a small life like a fairy. But when Lu Zioki tentatively asked the two of them if they were willing to stay and live there, the two decisively stated that they would still live comfortably in their home in Rongcheng. Although Lu Wanyi looks weak and gentle, she is as gentle as water. After all, that is the nest you have placed. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 482. This old banyan tree has grown so tall. Returning to the Lu family's old house, Lu Xianxian started yelling. She pointed at the thick tree trunk that protruded diagonally and said to the siblings with a smile, I remember that Lu Wanyi was clamoring for a swing, and Xiao Qi and Lao Lu worked hard for a long time to build it. Why is it demolished now? Hearing this, a flash of memory flashed in Lu Xiaoqi's eyes, and then she smiled bitterly and said, "If my sister is a little older, the branch will not be able to bear it. When I get older, my sister will never sit on the swing again." Lu Xiangxian's expression froze for a moment, and then she immediately smiled and said, "It's okay, I'll ask your dad to make a new one for you later. Put up an iron frame, it's very strong." Lu Zheng saw that Lu Wanyi's expression was a bit apologetic, and he immediately nodded in agreement. He had already learned from Lu Xiaoqi some of the things that happened after they left, and felt that he felt sorry for the two little ones, causing them to endure hardship for many days. Lu Wanyi didn't mind this, she just looked at her whole family with a sweet smile on her face. Until now, she felt like she was dreaming. Unprecedented happiness enveloped her, leaving her still in a dream. Lu Xiaoqi had already found someone to repair the wall in the courtyard that was collapsed by Haitan Tiu. At this moment, the Lu family's courtyard has returned to its original appearance, but it looks a little dusty because no one has lived in it for a long time. Fortunately, the four members of the Lu family are not ordinary people, and with just a little intervention, the entire small courtyard has a completely new look. After cleaning, Lu Xianxian happily took her husband and shouted that she wanted to go out to buy groceries and cook a delicious meal for her siblings. After their parents went out, only the siblings were left in the yard. The atmosphere suddenly became ambiguous. Lu Xiaoqi's eyes were soft as he stared at her sister with her eyebrows lowered and her head lowered. Her pretty face was filled with clouds and she was at a loss what to do. He couldn't help but feel a little funny, and deliberately teased his sister, "Yo! Where did this flower girl come from? Come here, let me give you a smile." As he spoke, he grinned, and laughed he 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 he. Lu Wanyi made a puff sound, rolled her eyes charmingly at her younger brother, and rewarded him with a pair of beautiful sanitary balls. Then she was hugged by Lu Xiaoqi and held in his arms. Neither of them spoke, they hugged each other quietly. "Wanyi." Lu Xiaoqi smelled the faint fragrance of her sister, and slowly put her mouth to her ear. The breath she exhaled made Lu Wanyi's earlobes turn red. "It's so good to have you by my side." Lu Wanyi's pretty face turned red, her expression became more and more charming, but she pushed Lu Xiaoqi away angrily and glared at him fiercely, "If you do something wrong again, I will ignore you." It turned out that when the two of them hugged each other, Lu Xiaoqi put her hands around her sister's slim waist honestly at first, but then she started to act dishonestly while hugging her. He directly divided his troops into two groups, trying to break through his sister's defense line and occupy her high ground, but he still said the words shaking the morale of the army. Fortunately, Lu Wanyi had been close to her brother for such a long time and had already seen through his tricks. Although her affection was getting stronger, she was wary of his irregular actions and immediately became alert. Seeing the look of disappointment on Lu Xiaoqi's face, Lu Wanyi couldn't help but said angrily, "I don't know when my parents will come back." "Oh. I understand." Lu Xiaoqi chuckled. The two walked around the yard hand in hand and talked about the past for a while. Not long after, Lu Xianxian rushed back home happily, followed by Lu Zheng, who was carrying a lot of ingredients. As soon as she entered the door, she saw her son making love to her daughter. The two were holding hands, with happy smiles on their faces. Lu Xianxian couldn't help being stunned for a moment, and then she pretended to be weird and shouted, "Oh, my eyes, why can't I see my eyes? Lao Lu, help me into the house quickly, I can't see you." "Oh." Lu Zheng only responded, and before he even figured out what was going on, Lu Xianxian forcibly dragged him into the kitchen. After a while, smoke began to rise, and the sound of pots and pans sounded in the kitchen. Lu Xiangxian's fussy exclamations and Lu Zheng's helpless instructions were mixed in. I have to mention that Lu Zheng really doted on his wife very well. In the past, Lu Zheng did all the cooking. When she was a little older, Lu Wanyi and Lu Zioqi took over this responsibility. Lu Xianxian usually doesn't touch the spring water with her fingers, but today for some reason she suddenly wanted to show her skills to everyone. It looks like the performance failed. Lu Zioqi and Lu Wanyi looked at each other and smiled, feeling a deep sense of happiness in their hearts. He reviewed the dishes on the table one by one in one breath, unaware that as he spoke, the smile on Lu Xianxian's face gradually became forced, and finally turned dark at a speed visible to the naked eye. As she said this, she couldn't help laughing again. His expression changed, and he started talking non-stop. This is some kind of roasted pork, there's too much soy sauce. Not only does it look pitch black, but it's also salty. How's it going? Is it delicious? Lu Xianxian's eyes blinked with a buling light. And these ribs are fried and turned black. How can anyone eat this? Don't dare to move. Don't dare to move at all. But after a while, they stopped laughing. Why are you standing there? Eat. Try mom's cooking. Seeing this scene, Lu Wanyi just pursed her lips and snickered, without reminding him. Not to mention this mapo tofu, it's all broken and can't even be picked up. I have seen cheating on my father, but I have never seen you cheating on my son like this. I'll give it a try. Lu Zheng said, looking at Lu Zioqi to indicate that it was his turn. Humph. If you can speak so well, I will punish you by eating all the food on the table. Lu Zheng also touched his head in embarrassment. It has been sealed for too long, and my craftsmanship has deteriorated a bit. At this time, Father Lu stood up. Ah! No. Mom, Lu Zioqi suddenly cried and pointed at the old father who cheated his son with some dissatisfaction. Dad also said so, why don't you punish him? After he finished speaking in one breath, Mother Lu's face was as dark as water, her peach blossom eyes were squinting at him, and she said with a smile on her face, go on, go on. At this time, Lu Wanyi, who had helped in the kitchen, revealed the secret. Dad cut these shredded potatoes. Lu Zioqi almost didn't put on the pain mask. At this moment, she could only mutter in silence, and finally uttered 4 big words with difficulty. It's time to eat. As he spoke, he took a chopstick and picked up the only eye-catching potato shreds on the table, put it into his mouth, and after eating it, he said, for example, these spicy and sour potato shreds, the potato shreds are cut into different thicknesses and are not symmetrical at all. This as a result, the thin potato shreds are fried to death, while the thick potato shreds are undercooked. Lu Zioqi felt something was wrong and immediately turned into a big quail huddled under its wings, shivering. Lu Zioqi took a look. What a guy. Since Dad has taken the lead in the charge, don't blame me, Lu, for being rude. Under Lu Xianxian's expectant gaze, Lu Zioqi picked up a piece of meat of unknown species with chopsticks and put it into her mouth. After chewing for a moment, she reluctantly swallowed it with an expressionless expression. Lu Xianxian put her hands on her hips, feeling very proud, and even had an unwiped gray stain on her face. Lu Zioqi, Lu Wanyi. Endless aftertaste. He said righteously, at this time, you should bravely point out her shortcomings, criticize her, educate her, and encourage her to make subsequent improvements. The two stared at the dark plates of unknown food on the table, looking at each other. What? Are you all so moved when you see my mother cooking by herself? When Lu Xianxian heard her husband's evaluation, she nodded repeatedly with a look of approval on her face. Hey! Don't talk nonsense. There will inevitably be some shortcomings in what your mother cooks for the first time. Lu Zioqi. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 483. Since Lu Xiangxian's training was indeed difficult to swallow, they finally decided to have a meal outside. Of course, those spoiled ingredients were not wasted. Lu Xiaoqi decided to take it back to let Heitan to experience the dangers of the human heart. After all, he certainly can't be the only one who is unlucky. As a pet, it is natural for him to share the same difficulties as his owner. Heitan Tiu. Good things never come to my mind, bad things never forget me. Then I really thank you. Although Lu Xiaoqi tried his best to keep a low profile during the meal, the cautious Lu Xianxian obviously kept what just happened in mind. So after dinner, she glared at Lu Xiaoqi and said angrily, "Come to my room tonight. As if to see how I deal with you." In response, Lu Xiaoqi could only smile and nodded. A day of nothing, nothing to mention. It's all daily chores. Having just moved back home, many things needed to be replaced and purchased. In addition, Lu Xiangxian's unpredictable temperament meant that things were always missing, and she often didn't remember what was missing until she needed to use them. But I am still very addicted to food, and I like to take care of the housework and take charge of the overall situation. And Lu Zheng is also a typical Cheng Cheng person. He follows his wife beside him, smiling and busy, and will not raise any objection at all. Lu Wanyi and Lu Xiaoqi were even less likely to raise any objections. After all, Heitan Tiu had already paid a heavy price for Lu Xiaoqi after he raised his opinion last time. Should I say it or not, it's good to have money. After a meal of shopping, a brand new cozy little nest was neatly arranged by a few people. After a busy day, everyone felt quite fulfilled. Lu Xianxian looked at the scene with her hands on her hips with great satisfaction, and then rubbed her hands to show that she would lead the way and cook a big meal for everyone to reward everyone for their hard work all afternoon. Lu Xiaoqi and Lu Wanyi were so frightened that their faces turned pale. They quickly waved their hands to persuade her and forcibly suppressed her eagerness to move. In the end, Lu Wanyi was the chef, and Lu Xiaoqi took over, emptying out the dinner in a few moments. It's not that we have anything particularly luxurious, just simple home-cooked dishes. The family of four gathered around the stone table and looked at the large table full of dishes, with smiles on their faces. Plain and happy. After the meal, Lu Zheng was sent to wash the dishes. Just when Lu Xiaoqi was about to run away, Lu Xianxian pinched her ears, stared at her and said, "Go to the room and wait." As she spoke, she smelled the smell on her body, frowned and said, "I'm going to wash up, and I'll take care of you when I get back." After saying this, she glared at Lu Xiaoqi fiercely, and then took Lu Wanyi, whose face was slightly red, and walked away hand in hand. I have to say that when the mother and daughter stand together, they look more like sisters. Lu Xiaoqi grimaced, thinking that after this busy afternoon, her mother had forgotten about it, but she didn't expect that she would always remember it. He entered the room dejectedly with his head hanging down. After her adoptive parents disappeared, Lu Xiaoqi sealed up their room because she was afraid that her frail sister would miss her. "The last time I moved, I broke the seal and took out the contents. Now that my parents are back, they naturally clean and decorate the house and buy new furniture." However, Lu Xiangxian's personality is no different from that of a little girl. She actually dressed up the room in pink and red, and even the bed sheets and quilt covers were in bright red and purple colors. I don't know what kind of happy event they thought their family was holding. Lu Xiaoqi waited in the room for more than an hour, but there was still no sign of his mother, which made him curious. These two women went to take a bath. Could it be that they fell into the tub and couldn't get out? In fact, with his strength, he only needs to radiate the power of the soul and feel it slightly, and he can have a panoramic view of everything around him. But there is no way he would do such a thing. After all, Lu Xiaoqi's world-leading level was not just for him to spy on. Squeak! The door to the room was pushed open. Lu Xiaoqi, who was sitting with her back to the door, was startled and quickly sat upright. After a moment of silence, he slowly walked towards Lu Xiaoqi. A gust of fragrant wind hit his nostrils, and Lu Xiaoqi was a little surprised, because he had already smelled that the smell was not his adoptive mother Lu Xianxian, but Lu Wanyi. He turned around and asked softly, "Why are you here?" Lu Wanyi lowered her head and blushed without saying anything. Her body exuded the fresh fragrance after washing, which was particularly attractive. Her fragrant face is half opened and charming. In the courtyard, the beauty takes a bath and washes off her fresh makeup. Seeing this made Lu Xiaoqi's heart tremble, and he almost gave up. Lu Xiaoqi gently held Lu Wanyi's hand and said cautiously, "Where's mom?" Lu Wanyi shyly hesitated. She went out with her dad. Going out, monk Lu Xiaoqi was confused. He didn't know what the adoptive mother was trying to do. Come back as soon as she's good. Her so-called punishment is to make me wait for her all night, right? Lu Xiaoqi said with a bitter smile. Don't tell me, this is really Lu Xiangxian's style. Lu Wanyi didn't answer and just retreated into Lu Xiaoqi's arms. It feels warm and soft in my arms, and the fragrant wind blows towards my face. At this moment, Lu Wanyi's towering chest rose and fell slightly. Her expression was particularly charming and delicate, her beautiful eyes were half open and half closed, and she breathed out slightly from her cherry mouth, "Xiaoqi." Only then did Lu Xiaoqi notice that her sister was wearing light makeup for the first time. Although it is not obvious, it just makes her more beautiful and attractive. Especially the small vermilion mouth and the slender and charming eyeliner. Lu Xiaoqi. Good guy. Use this to test cotters. Which cotter can withstand such a test? Lu Xiaoqi suddenly became excited. As soon as she lowered her head, she pursed Lu Wanyi's lips. Ahem, don't get me wrong, Lu Xiaoqi just wanted to taste the taste of the rouge on her sister's mouth. Lu Wanyi's heart was beating rapidly and her chest began to rise and fall violently. The little hand that was originally pressed against Lu Xiaoqi's chest began to rub circles on his body involuntarily. This aroused Lu Xiaoqi's desire so much that he almost couldn't hold back and turned into a wolf. But out of respect for his sister, although he was obsessed with lust, he always maintained a trace of reason. As a result, I didn't expect that Lu Wanyi, who had always been shy and conservative, actually changed from her normal behavior today and boldly took the initiative. She grabbed Lu Xiaoqi's big hand and pressed it in an indescribable position. Lu Xiaoqi's eyes suddenly widened. But he saw his sister looking at him steadily. In addition to the irrepressible emotion, there was also a hint of shyness and determination. Lu Xiaoqi suddenly understood. Good guy. Where is this punishment? It's obviously a reward. It seems that the adoptive mother will not come back. This room is also arranged like this on purpose. Although it seems to have been designed by my mother and the others. But Lu Xiaoqi felt a little relieved. Holding my sister's slender waist, endless tenderness welled up in my heart. After many ups and downs, he was finally going to achieve success with the woman in front of him. It was night, a soft cry of pain woke up the rising moon, causing it to shyly hide among the clouds. 2.5 hours of paid content are omitted here. Viewers are invited to open their browsers and imagine. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 484. In one night, Lu Xiaoqi finally broke the curse of his great magician and successfully transformed his sister from a young girl into a young woman. Seeing the trace of charm still remaining on the face of her sleeping sister who still looked sleepy, Lu Xiaoqi felt a trace of pity in her heart, and gently helped her cover her with the quilt, turned over and got up. As a strong person at the peak of Yuan Shen, Lu Xiaoqi's already fully stretched body is naturally impossible for Lu Wanyi's small body to be able to reduce. Without bragging, 8 times a night, the title of brother is well deserved. Although Lu Wanyi has extraordinary strength and already possesses Sun Yao level abilities, Lu is not an ordinary person, right? Ahem, this really can't be done, otherwise it will be easy to die. After getting up, Mr. Lu naturally started to prepare a loving breakfast in high spirits. He was going to show off his talents and make up for his sister. Maybe it's because of the smell. Father Lu and Mother Lu returned home after not returning home all night. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Lu Zioki coming out of the kitchen wearing a small apron and carrying a hearty breakfast. Hey! The sun is coming out in the west. Lu Xianxian teased, why don't you sleep a little longer? It means something. Lu Zioki also blushed and coughed, Mom and Dad, you are back. Lu Zhang kept a straight face, and when he heard Lu Zioki's greeting, he just nodded slightly. It's normal for him to feel awkward. After all, my little cotton padded jacket is going to be worn away. In fact, if Lu Zioki was more focused, he wouldn't mind anything. After all, he had watched Lu Zioki grow up, and he was originally a playmate for his daughter. It was absolutely correct to say that he was a child-adopted son-in-law. But the problem is, this Lu Zioki is too carefree. It was just that his daughter recognized him, so Lu Zheng couldn't say much. Although Lu Zioki is fickle, people do have the capital to be fickle. There is nothing to talk about in terms of character, strength, and appearance. If the one he was interested in was not his own daughter, Lu Zheng would not have any objection to him finding any number of partners, and would even welcome them with clapping hands. How can I put it, it's all bad luck. It was impossible for Lu Zioki not to notice the unkind look in his old father's eyes. But he could only say with a smile, I'll wake Wanyi up. Run away quickly. Back in the room, Lu Wanyi was awakened by the movement outside, and she opened her eyes drowsily. Seeing Lu Zioki push the door open, the sister with a cute face looked at Lu Zioki intently for a few seconds before shrinking under the quilt as if she had woken up. Lu Zioki couldn't help but smile when she saw this. Why are you so shy? What should be seen and what should not be seen, I played with them yesterday. What are you hiding from? You still say that? Lu Wanyi angrily pulled the pillow and threw it at Lu Zioki, but he caught it. This guy got the advantage and acted like a good boy. So annoying. Seeing her shy look, Lu Zioki just laughed, then walked over and placed the pillow beside the bed. Okay, Wanyi, let's get up and eat. Lu Wanyi muttered, then slowly said, I don't want to eat. Lu Zioki looked pitiful and said, this is a love breakfast I made specially for you, just eat some. Lu Wanyi retracted her head into the bed and said after a long time, okay, you get out first. Seeing that she still couldn't let go, Lu Zioki could only shrug her shoulders and turn around to leave. Lu Wanyi lingered in the room for a long time. Lu Zioki could hardly wait to open the door and go in. Then she opened the door and walked out. The walking posture is somewhat awkward. Lu Zioki's sharp eyes saw that the red sheets in the room were missing. He was stunned for a moment and muttered, okay, why don't you change the bed? Shut up suddenly. Because Lu Wanyi gave him a fierce look, why don't I blame you? Lu Zioki was speechless and could only touch her nose to acknowledge it. After the four of them finished their breakfast, Lu Xianxian pulled Lu Wanyi, and the mother and daughter ran aside to talk to each other. Lu Zioki and her adoptive father-in-law were clearing the dining table while enjoying his sharp eyes. There was no communication between the two of them during the whole process. It wasn't until she finished washing the dishes that Lu Zioki, who was feeling uncomfortable, heard Lu Zheng hold back and say, treat her well. This meaningless sentence made Lu Zioki stunned for a moment, and nodded hurriedly, Dad, don't worry. I will take good care of Wanyi in this life. Love your mother as much as you love her. Lu Zheng's expression softened a little, he nodded, patted Lu Zioki's shoulder again, and walked out. Lu Zioki looked at the water-stained handprint on her shoulder and felt a little dumbfounded. This dad is really... Do you think he did it on purpose or accidentally? Several days passed by. Do you usually pay too little attention to maintenance? Is your private life too messy? Zioki. He suddenly remembered something. Then she let out a queenly laugh like ho 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 ho. It seems that I have been targeted by trolls from a certain country before. Fuzu that time. Lu Zioki did not dare to be careless, and hurriedly patted her chest and made repeated promises, almost swearing to the heavens. As expected of a couple, they all talk exactly the same thing. If you haven't reported it for so long, the interest rate will be increased dozens of times, right? Even the people closest to them have completely forgotten their existence. Even the hidden attributes such as lifespan, presence, charm value and wealth value can be modified. When Lu Zioki walked out of the kitchen, Lu Xianxian also pulled Lu Wanyi up to him, put Lu Wanyi's hand on Lu Zioki's palm, and showed a rare serious expression. Wanyi, I'll leave it to you. You have to treat her well. Lu Zioki, Lu Wanyi. Lu Xianxian nodded with satisfaction, then smiled and said, it's good now, Lao Lu and I can finally live a free life as two people. He has remembered this grudge. While having fun, don't forget to take revenge. Next, Lu Zioki was naturally so happy that she almost forgot about the people in the Pure Land. She and Lu Wanyi lived like a couple of gods every day. Excuse me, can my mother still want it? Because of his modified attributes, he can not only change the conventional strength, agility, blood, and so on. But more people disappeared without a trace. Because Lu Zioki completely deprived them of their sense of existence, making them non-exist. Those who like to target him and the Dragon Kingdom will not be spared. This incident even caused a sensation all over the world. And this third still has a choice. Of course, no one knew that this was Lu Zioki's doing. They were all still trying to figure out how this guy could be so good and then die of old age. Maybe growing up into a real man has tempered his temper a lot. Then he realized that his natural ability was truly terrifying. This time he didn't go on a killing spree. The strong Yuehui who could have lived for 300 to 400 years suddenly died on the spot and died at the end of his life, becoming the first Yuehui strongman in the world to die of old age. Even if we look back in time, we cannot detect their existence. So he took his sister directly to the United States for a honeymoon. Instead, he used his own talents to directly eliminate 1/3 of the politicians and capitalists in the United States who were full of dirty interests. Waiting online, it's very urgent. Lu Zioki directly caused the top richest man in the United States to go bankrupt overnight. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 485. Such a large-scale disappearance of the American population did not attract anyone's attention. Their disappearance went unnoticed. There are many people who were directly eliminated by Lu Zioki. They even hold high positions in the United States and are very important military, government, or business personnel. But now it seems that even if they are gone, it has not caused chaos or social unrest in the United States. It even made the situation in the United States much better than before. Facts have proven that these guys are really just a bunch of worms who are not only useless but also causing chaos. Of course, this is just a joke. Lu Zioki thinks there are two reasons. On the one hand, it was because he had eliminated all the forces that were hostile to the Dragon Kingdom. After eliminating such a large number of people, the people under him were more united than before, and naturally the efficiency in all aspects increased. The other side. Even if Lu Zioki didn't take action, the United States would still be in chaos. The absolute freedom they believe in has allowed them to launch countless bizarre remarks and jaw-dropping operations, plus capital is behind them to add fuel to the flames. Incidents of gun discharges and $0 purchases occur one after another. Even when you are walking on the streets of the United States, you may be dragged into an alley and said hey, hey, hey. What, you said you are a man. You don't think I'm talking about girls, do you? Where do you think the word gay comes from? Luzioki even saw a piece of news about the United States by chance. It means that after the news of the death of the two Japanese people in the United States came back to China, countless people suddenly felt that the world was falling apart. A certain young man felt that his faith had collapsed and decided to commit suicide by swallowing a gun. Just before he could muster up the courage to shoot, a group of American police officers came after hearing the news and shot and killed the young man first. Well, yes, that's right, in order to prevent you from committing suicide, I shot you directly. Chicken beep you. There are countless such weird news stories, and here is just a typical case. After all, if you write too much, you will be said to have a low word count. All in all, after Luzioki took action to rectify the United States, this corrupt, dirty, and chaotic country had a slight improvement in recovery. Luzioki could only shrug. Hey, I can't help it, why am I so willing to help others? Sun, beach, bikini. This is a Hawaiian beach. Naturally, you come here to enjoy a wonderful vacation life. This was the first time Luzioki saw her sister wearing a bikini. It has to be said that Lu Wanyi's increasingly plump figure is indeed beautiful, with the front and back bulging. Especially the two car lights in the front, under Luzioki's care, have become quite astonishing in size. Especially Lu Wanyi's shy look after putting on those three-point clothes made Luzioki even more fascinated. I almost used the sky as my bed and the earth as my bed, and started to use restricted paid content. Brothers, I also want to write more good-looking content, but it's a pity that my writing was so obscure yesterday that I almost failed the review. I really don't dare to scratch my head anymore today. As for whether others will see it, sorry, with Luzioki's domineering character, he has already set up a mirror. Everyone who comes here can't help but look elsewhere, and Luzioki and the others cannot be found at all. Luzioki wore a pair of cool black sunglasses and applied sunscreen to Lu Wanyi with a hee-hee smile. In fact, with my sister's current strength, she is not afraid of the ultraviolet rays of the cricket sun at all. Luzioki's intention of applying sunscreen to Lu Wanyi was naturally obvious. Obviously the drunkard's intention is not to drink. Lu Wanyi obviously knew about it, but she still acquiesced in the intimacy between the two. After all, I have done more intimate things countless times, so this little advantage naturally doesn't matter. Just when Luzioki was dancing and happily, a figure suddenly flashed behind him. It seems like you've been a little too happy and careless lately. Luzioki's face darkened, and she quickly waved her hand to block Lu Wanyi's perception. Then she turned around and said, "What are you doing out here?" It was the Digi who had been hiding inside him. Because Luzioki had to do something embarrassing with her sister, it was naturally impossible for Ge Lan to watch it for free. So he used his magic to block her perception. Once or twice is okay, but if it happens too many times, Ge Lan will inevitably feel resentful. At least she knew the importance and did not cause trouble for Luzioki at the critical moment. But this time is obviously an exception. Luzioki was having sex with her sister when she unexpectedly showed up. She witnessed with her own eyes Luzioki's improvement speed, which was like riding a train. She looked at the sky cautiously. In the blink of an eye, just over half a year had passed, and now his realm was already at the pinnacle of the world. Don't forget the promise between us. Your strength has surpassed mine in all aspects. Digi glanced at Luzioki with a somewhat complicated expression and said calmly. But he had a reason to save the world. With this ability, the Pure Land of Ultimate Bliss will no longer be a small city, but a serious world. Even if he can use the Pure Land of Ultimate Bliss to take away all the people he knows, his friends still have relatives and friends. It seems that because she escaped from the dungeon and is somehow related to the person behind the scenes, she can be aware of the development of the situation. He is accelerating the erosion of this world. Just like banning skills, banning his talents. She gave Luzioki a hint, which made Luzioki, who was quite happy at first, feel his heart sink. Because there are too many people and things in this world that he cares about. I came out to remind you that we don't have much time. It turned into a ray of light and returned to Luzaoki's body. Can you not feel guilty? What if the person behind the scenes also has the ability to target talents? This is obviously unrealistic. Perhaps, this is the bond formed between the world and him. Luzaoki looked at the scene and thought of the dead and withered world shown in Gean's copy, which made her even more determined to protect this world. Faced with the mastermind behind the scenes that even Hideaki could not do anything about, is he, Mr. Lu, really capable of resisting him? At this moment, although Luzaoki's talents have been fully complemented, resulting in unrivaled strength, he is not very sure that he can deal with the completely unknown enemy. Is it possible that he can still pack up everything he can touch? When we first met, Luzaoki was just a rookie in the early stage of the Golden Elixir, Moonlight Realm. He relied solely on brute force and fancy skills to fight. Luzaoki removed the restraint, and Lu Wanyi didn't notice it. She was still happily playing with the waves on the beach, laughing like a silver bell. An invisible weight fell on his shoulders. After all, no matter how talented he is, it is still an innate ability. Therefore, he must protect this world. Fortunately for him, he just took it with him. Although her current state is special, even Wang Yanran cannot detect her existence, let alone Lu Wanyi, who has no strength but no relevant micromanagement. Seeing Luzaoki's expression becoming serious, Ge Lan stopped saying anything, and finally left only one sentence. In fact, with his ability, even if the world is destroyed by the people behind the scenes using copies, he will still be able to survive. But seeing her appear, Luzaoki couldn't help but feel guilty. After all, everyone else is a hidden beauty in a golden house. Luzaoki pondered, and his thoughts of playing around suddenly faded away. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 486. Of course, Luzaoki would definitely do it. But it's not reckless. He did it with a plan and a purpose. Luzaoki planned to improve the strength of those around her first. At least let them have a certain ability to protect themselves before the catastrophe strikes, so that they will not be unable to fight back against the monsters that are constantly pouring out of the dungeon. It is not difficult for Luzaoki to achieve this step. The simplest way is to directly let everyone join the Pure Land, and then he will reinforce the growth one by one. Obviously, this method works, but everyone is not Lu Wanyi. The great sage with the god-level talent can fight on his behalf. Yao who cannot display his strength may not be much stronger than Yu Hui at his peak. So Luzaoki decided to use the second method. Do you still remember the crystal cores he collected before? Props appearing in chapter 378. A complete crystal core can create a powerful person in the sun. Although the sun may have a little bit of moisture, it is still better than Luzaoki's own efforts to encourage growth. And the quality is not enough, let's make up the quantity. Just let Luzaoki form a complete crystal core, and then put it in the package column. Wouldn't it be true that the strong Sun Yao man could have as much as he wanted? So, Luzaoki's top priority is to return to Dragon Kingdom and find the remaining 2 crystal core fragments. He already knew the whereabouts of the remaining 2 crystal core fragments. Both are in the hands of the hidden family. What's even more coincidental is that Luzaoki is no stranger to these 2 hidden families. One is the force behind his beloved sister Yan, the Xiao family. The other one is the Ye family where the guy who claims to be his biological father lives. It seemed that he still had to go to this place. But what Luzaoki has to do now is to take Lu Wanyi home first. After all, the 2 of them have been traveling around the world for a while. Although they have been in contact with Lu's father and Lu's mother on the phone, now that he has to do business, it is naturally not easy for his sister to follow him. Moreover, the adoptive parents have just returned, and my sister has not spent much time with them. Ahem, of course we can't rule out the possibility that the old couple still dislike Lu Wanyi being around and hindering their sweet world. In any case, it's right to go back first. If that doesn't work, Lu Zioki can still take her sister to her pure land of bliss. After going home and walking to a familiar intersection and seeing the familiar bus, Lu Zioki suddenly thought of an old acquaintance she hadn't seen for a long time. Yes, it was his best friend in high school, Chen Haoran, Chen Fat. Although he has never come back to see Fatty Chen, he has paid attention to his news. Even under his shadow, Chen Haoran was directly promoted to an adventurer due to his excellent performance in the adventure group. He entered the dungeon and was baptized into a starlight powerful. Perhaps it's because of preconceptions after seeing him at his worst, and then looking at him losing weight, it will be amazing. But I'm not moved at all, and I even want to laugh. I saw the saw-toothed tiger rushing towards me with its huge mouth. I just made a sliding shovel. Chen Haoran, whom I haven't seen for a long time, has indeed changed a lot. These little guys are like Chen Haoran. They did not take the college entrance examination but were unwilling to settle for mediocrity. They directly joined the adventure group to do odd jobs, hoping that one day they could pass the adventurer assessment and become an official adventurer to enter the dungeon adventure. The unlucky little guys behind me were so scared that their legs were weak. After all, he gave the other party a life-saving artifact. Lu Zioki was not worried about whether Chen Haoran's three-legged cat kung fu would be in danger if he followed others in the dungeon. The saw-toothed tiger was only a few meters away from us at that time. As the saying goes, wealth is found in danger. According to the news he had received before, Lu Zioki came to the location of Chen Haoran's adventure group. At this time, Chen Haoran was followed by a large group of young people, who all looked admiringly when they heard him bragging wildly about his achievements. The adventurer is an example of this. I have to say that the saying that every fat person is a potential stock is absolutely correct. The image at this moment has thick eyebrows and big eyes, and it looks very down to earth, which makes people feel good. And Chen Haoran is undoubtedly a model of success in their eyes. The first thing is that he has lost weight, and he has become extremely thin. There is no trace of bloat at all. Now he can be said to be strong, and it seems inappropriate to call him Chen Fat. The main reason is that although this guy looks ordinary, his originally small squinty eyes have actually become a lot bigger after losing weight, and he looks bright and energetic. However, Lu Zioki still missed the silly little fat man who followed him and helped him take the blame. Chen Haoran, who has lost weight, not only looks much leaner, but also has an exceptionally tall and slender figure. It turns out that his chubby face is still somewhat handsome after the whitening has been reduced. Not as high-spirited as he is now. After all, ordinary adventurers work with their heads tied to their belts. From such a distance, Lu Zioki could smell the slightest hint of love coming. It's just that I miss you after not seeing each other for a long time. The last point is that he has a lot of tan. It can be seen that this guy has suffered a lot. The second is his look. Although he didn't say anything in the past, he had always been submissive, hunched over, and timid. Even when he was slightly relaxed with Lu Zioki, he still looked timid. Therefore, he decided to visit his old friends before setting off. With this piece of equipment alone, at least he can walk sideways in the Starlight level dungeon. There was also a beautiful little girl with a shy smile on her face, and her eyes seemed to be shining when she looked at Chen Haoran. "It's not me, Chen, who is blowing it for you." A familiar yet somewhat unfamiliar figure walked out of the station, dancing and gesticulating as he walked. Add 12 growth level full body heavy armor. From far away, I heard a familiar voice saying in a loud voice. Global copy, My talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 487. Luzaoki smiled slightly and originally wanted to go up and give Haoran a surprise. But I heard a young man behind me suddenly ask, "Brother Chen, I heard that you and Lu Rieo were classmates back then. And you have a good relationship." Hearing this, Chen Haoran straightened his chest, patted his chest and said loudly, "Of course. I'm Luzaoki's good big brother. That's a very close relationship. Luzaoki. Good guy." This kid looked like he hadn't seen him for a long time, and he was really drifting off. Although there are things that have gotten better, he has also gotten into the bad habit of bragging. Wow. Hearing this, everyone looked at Chen Haoran with admiration. Chen Haoran was even more proud when he saw this, and continued to brag, "I'm not bragging to you. When Luzaoki first awakened his talent, he was just a gray-level talent. He was ostracized by other people in the class. But I was amazed by his bones. He was born to learn how to cook." One after another old events were revealed, causing everyone to shout and marvel. Luzaoki suddenly couldn't sit still. "Why haven't you noticed this guy has such a big mouth before? If he doesn't stop him, Chen Haoran will probably tell him all the embarrassing things he did back then. What's even worse is that during his absence, Chen Haoran didn't know how many times he publicized these glorious deeds everywhere." Luzaoki put her hand on her forehead and looked speechless. At this time, there was only a slight movement of the lips. Chen Haoran's originally eloquent words suddenly stopped. There was a flash of astonishment in his eyes. After Luzaoki transmitted the sound into the secret again, shock, surprise and embarrassment quickly flashed across his face. Everyone was surprised to see him suddenly become silent, especially when they saw the sudden change in his expression. After all, although this face-changing skill is a specialty of Chengdu, not everyone can master it skillfully. I didn't expect Chen Haoran's face to be so familiar. He is indeed an extraordinary person. Everyone secretly admired. Only the little girl looked at Chen Haoran a little worriedly and whispered, "Brother Chen, what's wrong?" Therefore, girls are more thoughtful, and any slight change will be noticed immediately. To be honest, girls are really born to be Sherlock Holmes. Hey, I won't say it anymore, I can only say that I understand everything. Chen Haoran also reacted, coughed immediately, and said, "Okay, that's it for today. I have something else to do, so you can leave first." Huh. A group of teenagers were secretly excited because they could hear the gossip of the youngest Sunyao warrior in the history of the Dragon Kingdom, but Chen Haoran stopped talking as soon as he started talking. The feeling of being aroused and unable to get up or down immediately made everyone let out a sigh. But at this moment, Chen Haoran ignored their feelings and waved them away. He only pulled the beautiful girl towards Luzaoki. At this time, Luzaoki was sitting on a chair for people to rest with her legs crossed, holding a cup of milk tea in her hand and drinking it slowly and leisurely. Zaoki. Old Chen Haoran saw that he was a little happy. After all, he hadn't seen him for a long time, and he felt a sense of intimacy when he saw him. He waved his hand and pulled the little girl to run over. Luzaoki took a sip of milk tea, threw the milk tea she was holding in her other hand into Chen Haoran's arms, and said with a half-smile, "Good brother, drink milk tea." Chen Haoran's face turned red, naturally knowing that Luzaoki had heard everything he had just boasted about. But he just smiled. Based on their relationship, Luzaoki wouldn't mind what he said. After all, he is still very measured. What he talks about is something everyone knows, and he will not make up random things or reveal Luzaoki's privacy. No, Luzaoki just glared at him and gave up when she saw that he was as thick-skinned as the black rose she was wearing and couldn't penetrate it at all. He lazily said, "I just passed by and bought it from the same store as before. I just didn't know you brought one with you, so you bought one less cup." As he spoke, he looked to the side of the little girl who looked obviously shocked and disbelieving when she saw Luzaoki. It seemed that she must have recognized Luzaoki. After all, Mr. Lu's promotional portraits were frequently posted by Dragon Kingdom officials. Shouldn't this be introduced? Oh. Only then did Chen Haoran react. He first took out the milk tea in his hand, inserted the tube into it and handed it to the little girl. Then he said to the little girl, "This is the person we just talked about, and he is also my good brother, Luzaoki." Then he introduced Luzaoki, "This is a fu, it's." He hesitated a little and seemed a little shy. The little girl was more direct and bold. She hugged Chen Haoran's arm and said openly, "I am brother Chen's partner." "Hello, Lu Rieo, I have heard about your deeds for a long time. Isn't it a bit like hearing something once is worse than seeing it once?" Luzaoki raised her eyebrows and said with a smile. Afu nodded, then chuckled, and said, "I knew brother Chen was bragging just now. How could someone like Lu Rieo be someone else's little brother?" Chen Haoran looked a little embarrassed. Luzaoki's thoughts were like lightning, and she immediately understood. It was estimated that the source of the statement was that Chen Haoran had said it in order to show off in front of girls. He smiled slightly without any intention of revealing it. "No, you really guessed wrong. I was Haoran's younger brother back then." Afuxio opened her mouth slightly. "Really? That's right. It's more real than a steamer." As soon as Luzaoki said this, she immediately received a look of gratitude and shame from Chen Haoran. Luzaoki returned a look. "Needless to say, we are brothers in our hearts. Right hand beating chest.jpg. Although Afu didn't know there was any hidden secret between the two men, she knew that things were definitely not as simple as she saw. However, she was smart and didn't try to expose it. Instead, she smiled and said, "Well, why don't you let me show off my skills and cook a delicious meal for you all when we meet old friends today?" Oh, Luzaoki was a little surprised, but looked Chen Haoran up and down. Chen Haoran nodded proudly. Although he didn't say anything, his expression of affirmation and show-off of Afu's cooking skills was self-evident. "I can't believe that this damn fat guy is so lucky to have found such a virtuous partner." Then he smiled and nodded, agreeing to Afu's invitation. Full of wine and food, the two grown men sat slumped on the sofa in Chen Haoran's new home, sighing with contentment. "I have to say that this little girl is really good at cooking those exquisite side dishes, and a 5-star chef can only do that. Luzaoki has traveled all over the country, and it's not like he hasn't eaten some good food. Some places even tried their best to please him." In comparison, Afu's food is also remarkable in Luzaoki's eyes. Her craftsmanship is the same as people's. Xiaojiabiu has a somewhat unique taste. Seeing her clearing away the dishes and working in the kitchen, Chen Haoran's face was filled with happiness. He turned around and said suddenly, "We plan to get married at the end of this year. Xiaoki, can you come and be my best man when the time comes?" Luzaoki thought for a while and agreed decisively, "Okay." There were not many words, the two looked at each other and smiled, saying nothing. Global copy, My talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 488. As the saying goes, you have short hands when you take someone else, and you have a soft mouth when you eat someone. Naturally, it was impossible for Luzaoki to remain silent when meeting his younger siblings for the first time. After learning that Afu's preference was the mage type, he generously took out a few pieces of golden legendary equipment. These are all the skills he refined to create new equipment for his sister. Although his attributes are not yet taken seriously by him, for ordinary adventurers, they are already rare and top quality. Many adventurers may not be able to obtain such equipment even if they pursue it throughout their lives. However, what was placed in front of Chen Haoran and Afu was a complete set of equipment. While taking out the equipment, Luzaoki also secretly exerted his own natural ability, using Wind Spirit Moon Shadow, which not only eliminated the need to wear the equipment, but also raised the enhancement level to 15 in one fell swoop. Suddenly this priceless equipment became even more valuable than money can measure. Let's put it this way, if the properties of this thing are exposed, those adventurers at the peak level of Uxiwi who used to be superior in the past will also fight for them, and fight fiercely and bloody. However, for Luzioki, these are just a piece of cake. As for why Luzioki didn't just increase the attributes and enhancement level of the equipment. The main reason is that the attributes are so good and the value has increased exponentially that Luzioki is afraid that they will not accept it. If it were strengthened, it would be for other reasons. The main reason is that before the enhancement add 16, the equipment exudes a faint blue light, with only a slight difference in strength. Even if you are well aware of the effect of equipment enhancement, it is difficult to see the difference with the naked eye. But after reaching 16, the light emitted by the equipment will change from blue to purple. At add 32 it becomes pink, then gold and finally dark gold. The equipment on Luzioki is also enhanced by add 99, the upper limit is reached. Now, once he summons the Black Rose, the dark golden light emitted can simply burn the eyes of others. This is also the reason why Luzioki dare not increase the enhancement level of these equipment too high, because it is too conspicuous. Ordinary adventurers who have add 10 equipment are already elite level characters, not to mention that the more they are strengthened, the difficulty of strengthening increases exponentially. If add 16 equipment appears on little people like Shenhei Oren, I'm afraid it's a disaster rather than a blessing. So add 15 is just right, not too conspicuous, but the improvement is ridiculously big. Wearing this equipment, with a Fu's current strength, her combat effectiveness can at least be doubled several times. More importantly, the safety factor will be greatly improved. This must be Luzioki's care for his younger siblings. Of course, when a Fu saw these equipment at first, she also rejected them. After all, this thing is so precious. Have you ever seen someone give you stock worth billions of dollars as a face-to-face gift? You are not your biological son whom I have never met. Even the foster father cannot be so kind to his own good son. Even Shenhei Oren was shocked by the generous Luzioki, and said several times, "No way." Then Luzioki said in his ear, "This thing can save your life." Shenhei Oren's attitude suddenly changed 180 degrees. In the end, under the double persuasion of her partner and Luzioki, Fu had no choice but to accept the equipment. However, she repeatedly told her that she was just keeping it for her. If Luzioki wanted to take it back one day, he could just come to her and ask for it. Luzioki secretly smiled. "You are still so stubborn at this time. When you see how good it is, you will know what Wang Jing's law is." Of course, Luzioki would not treat his brothers badly. But seeing that he couldn't bear to part with the add 12 heavy armor, given to him by Luzioki, that had been with him for a long time, Luzioki didn't force it. He just backhand strengthened the equipment again and gave up. After all, the attributes of this growth equipment are of the highest quality. At first, Luzioki just disliked that it occupied too many equipment slots. But I took a lot of other things. For example, skills that have a great impact on improving an adventurer's strength and props that open the skill bar. Luzioki was immediately filled with Shenhei Oren. Give him a lot of skills with good quality and attributes, and let him do it by himself. He also gave him a dozen bottles of water of the Forgotten River God, and let him do it by himself. If he doesn't use it enough, he can wash it off. Change it to another. Shenhei Oren was so shocked that he never closed his mouth. Luzioki just smiled slightly when facing this situation. This will let you see what it means for one person to achieve enlightenment. Chickens and dogs ascend to heaven. It was obviously quite pleasant to meet Shenhei Oren again. Although there was a small episode, it did not affect the deep friendship between them. But what happened next didn't make Luzioki so happy. As soon as he was about to leave for the hidden Xiao family to ask for the third crystal core fragment, a call came from the relevant departments of the Dragon Kingdom. This sentence directly made Lu Xiaoqi's face sink like water. The fog has spread. You know, hundreds of years ago, copies officially came to this world. Everyone has almost forgotten the climate of fog. Because, behind every fog, there is a brand new copy that has not been conquered before. In densely populated cities, prohibition formations have long been set up to block the appearance of fog. And just today, people once again recall the fear of being dominated by fog. Countless fogs began to ignore the formations set up by adventurers, and began to devour and occupy the territory of this world on a large scale. The whole world sounded the alarm almost at the same time. Really? Digi's feeling is right? That guy really couldn't help but take action. Lu Xiaoqi looked ugly. As a strong Sun Yao man, he is naturally obliged to obey the country's arrangements and carry out the task of clearing the fog. However, Lu Xiaoqi did not panic at all, and even had a sneer on her lips. I think you don't understand at all. I'm a loser. So brave. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 489. Special Forces helicopter gunships land under the border. Lu Xiaoqi jumped out of the plane in a swaggering manner. Lu Rieo, a group of heavily armed people, immediately came forward. Everyone was covered in dust, and it was obvious that they were all adventurers who had just come off the battlefield. This time, all three Sun Yao players in the country were dispatched, including Lu Zhenhua, who was seriously injured and had yet to recover. However, when the three of them met, Lu Xiaoqi secretly removed his injuries. However, he still felt that the negative effects remaining on his body were not very obvious. When the debuff on his body disappeared, he would be surprised. I found that I was actually healed. However, the three of them did not appear on the same battlefield. This time the mist invaded in an all-out way. All countries had no time to take care of themselves. The Dragon Kingdom was vast and rich in resources, and suffered the most serious losses. The mist almost encroached on the territory that originally belonged to the Dragon Kingdom bit by bit along the border. So the three of them were divided into different areas to support the areas where the situation was most serious. Lu Xiaoqi didn't waste any more words and asked directly, "What's the situation now?" The leader of them, the uncle, replied with a heavy face, "It's not optimistic." A large number of their comrades were completely swallowed up by this silent fog, and they even had no time to use the dungeon escape props. The intensity of the fog in this comprehensive invasion is quite rare. It does not have the strength of Yuehui level. Once it is dragged into the dungeon, it will be a capital death. Even Moonlight level adventurers only have the ability to protect themselves. It often takes several or even a dozen Moonlight level adventurers to form a team to break through the fog. The most important thing is, it's so sudden. Caught off guard, everyone was completely unprepared for this fog dungeon. They rushed into the battle without collecting intelligence. Naturally, the battle situation was not very good. Only then did Lu Xiaoqi notice that many of the people in this group had injuries. Even the most severe ones still have bandages wrapped around their waists. An adventurer actually used such a backward method to bandage his wounds. Obviously, this also means that the country's logistics work and medical personnel cannot keep up with the consumption rate. The reason is also very simple, because they use the simplest, crudest, and most effective way to block the fog: fill it in with people. Countless adventurers formed small teams at the front line of the battlefield and stood in separate lines, quietly waiting for the fog to spread and swallow them up. When there are adventurers in the dungeon, the fog will temporarily stop expanding until the adventurers in the dungeon are completely swallowed. But this vast fog is not just a single copy, but is formed by countless fog copies, that is, the initial copies, superimposed on each other. So even though adventurers continue to be drowned by the fog, the slowly advancing pace of the fog never stops. What's more important is that even if the adventurer team successfully breaks out of the dungeon, they won't even have time to take a breath before being dragged into a new dungeon by a new fog. It can be called a narrow escape. Even so, no one in this group of soldiers chose to retreat or dodge. Even before he even stirred up his magic power, the invisible power he exuded made everyone drip with cold sweat, and they had no choice but to nod in agreement. And these warriors are undoubtedly such a lovely group of people. The military discipline was strict, and even though tens of thousands of adventurers were gathered here, they didn't make any noise. There is a saying, there is no quiet time, but there are people carrying the burden for you in the dark night. He is willing to go through fire and water, even if his body is broken into pieces, he has no regrets. After some counting, it was found that only half of the original participants were left outside. Except for a small number of people who escaped from the dungeon by chance after successfully conquering the dungeon, most of the adventurers who entered the dungeon returned. There is no chance to come out. And these cute warriors. They just used their bright, hopeful eyes to stare at Luzaoki, who was standing high on the stage with her hands behind her back. Before long, the venue was filled with people. He became more determined to obtain the core fragments. Luzaoki's heart became even heavier. The uncle hesitated for a moment and then said, "This, Lurieo, I'm afraid this is not appropriate." So he was very extravagant and rewarded each person individually with a healing starlight, which was equivalent to releasing dozens of secret skills in an instant. Luzaoki nodded, first waved his hand and lowered beams of light to cover everyone, completely recovering their injuries, and then slowly said, "Notify everyone who has not entered the dungeon to withdraw." Some of these warriors are still preparing for battle and have never entered the dungeon, and they are full of vigor. Because behind them is their country. It is their family and the land that they have always loved, the land that gave birth to him and raised him. It seemed as if he had already known his identity and placed all his hopes on this powerful man of the sun who was said to be unparalleled in the world. In just one cup of tea, everyone was withdrawn from the front line. Of course, this is simply not worth mentioning to someone like Luzaoki whose skills have no CD and no money. They were still a little tired, as if they had experienced a series of battles, and their bodies were more or less injured, and there were even many missing arms and legs. Luzaoki glared at him and said, "Do as I say." Everyone touched the completely healed wounds on their bodies, and while they were still amazed by the power of the Ryeo-level secret technique, they couldn't help but look at each other when they heard Luzaoki's last words. This time it wasn't just for his family and friends. No one had any doubts about the decision made by Shangguan. While their injuries were recovering, their strength also quietly improved to a higher level. Luzaoki asked someone to gather everyone together. Now Luzaoki is no longer limited by mana, and has already upgraded all her skills to an exceptional level. Their strength may not be outstanding, but they do have a deep love for their motherland and their homeland. Not to mention that all of these personnel are professionally trained adventurers, and their execution efficiency is terrifyingly exaggerated. Even so, they still stood upright, like sharp arrows. As long as they gave the order, they could take the lead in charging at any time. But the people he healed didn't know it. In this regard, after understanding the situation, Luzaoki couldn't help but feel a burst of admiration for them. Now his skill bar is empty, but his strength has increased countless times than before. I have to mention that the efficiency of the Dragon Kingdom army must be given a thumbs up. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 490. Without too many words, Luzaoki had already understood their thoughts. So he didn't talk too much, and even changed his previous playful and carefree personality. Raising his hand, he summoned a huge starburst to cover the whole place and heal everyone's injuries. Then with a smile on his lips, he said calmly, "Everyone, take a rest for a while and let's see how Lu defeats the enemy." The tone is calm and confident, full of unparalleled appeal. Even in such a dangerous situation, everyone unanimously chose to believe in him. I saw Lu Xiaoqi slowly floating in the air, stepping forward slightly, and a white lotus appeared out of thin air at his feet. But behind him, there were 8 more Lu Xiaoqi who were just like him. When these Lu Xiaoqi first appeared, their auras were not very strong, at most the level of golden elixir. However, in just a moment, they directly broke through to the extreme and became the top powerhouse in the peak realm of Yuan Shen. But Lu Xiaoqi's pace did not stop. Not only him, but also Lu Xiaoqi behind him also took a step forward with him. In an instant, 81 Lu Xiaoqi appeared in mid-air. However, Lu Xiaoqi's movements still did not stop. He kept moving forward, and new Lu Xiaoqi kept appearing behind him, repeating this process. Everyone was immediately stunned. Lotus grows at every step. Divide the soul. What kind of magical trick is this? Even this group of highly disciplined warriors was stunned by Lu Xiaoqi's sleight of hand. They were stunned on the spot. What is the principle behind this? It is completely inconsistent with the law of conservation of energy. If Lu Xiaoqi continues to reproduce indefinitely, this is probably scarier than that fog copy. Of course Lu Xiaoqi knew what they were thinking. But he just smiled. This is also thanks to the friendly sponsorship of Mr. Maluo. If he hadn't used his great magical power to split Lu Xiaoqi's soul into 3,000 pieces, it was absolutely impossible for Lu Xiaoqi to comprehend this magical power of differentiation of souls so quickly. The so-called differentiation of soul is, to put it bluntly, it means cutting oneself with a knife and splitting one's own soul. It is equivalent to creating an extra clone out of thin air that has the same thoughts as one's own. However, it is impossible to cover everything. Although this differentiated soul clone has endless magical uses, it will also take away part of the strength of the original body, and at least its own strength cannot be the same as the original body, at least it is a big stage lower than the original body. Therefore, if it is used against the enemy rashly, it will make the enemy laugh out loud. Usually those who use this method are monks who are stuck in a certain realm and have no way to advance. They try to experience their own realm through the soul clone method and accumulate more power to break through the existing level. But this obvious statement obviously does not apply to Lu Xiaoqi. Who makes people worry? Every time a clone appears, he directly uses Wind Spirit Moon Shadow to improve his cultivation to the extreme, reaching a state that is indistinguishable from the original body. Only in this way can we achieve the shocking effect now. As for the lotus growing every step of the way, just filling the cup. After all, Mr. Lu is a hot man who claims to be either filling the cup or on the way to fill it. It is very simple to cultivate to his level, do it deliberately, and grow lotus step by step. Even if it is 3 flowers gathered at the top and 5 chi rising towards the origin, if you want to see this characteristic, he can show it to you at any time. Outside the venue is the boundless fog. At this moment, it is still rolling and surging, spreading forward bit by bit. I have no idea what I will face next. Lu Xiaoqi walked a total of 9 steps in mid-air to the fog. Because in the air, his steps seem to be small, but they move a lot of distance, which is quite a bit like shrinking the ground into an inch. In less than 10 steps, he had crossed over 10 kilometers of fog. But behind Lu Xiaoqi was an endless army of Lu Xiaoqi. Really crowded. With every step he took, Lu Xiaoqi's number expanded 9 times. 9 steps, that is 387 million Lu Xiaoqi. This is already the combined population of several provinces in the Dragon Kingdom. If it weren't for the fact that they were in mid-air, there would still be layers between Lu Xiaoqi and Lu Xiaoqi. This distance would not be able to accommodate so many of his soul clones. At this time, Luzioki felt a little tired. After all, he divided the soul into more than 300 million parts. Even with his current cultivation level, he feels a little dwarfed by him. However, he just smiled coldly at this moment and said leisurely, comparing numbers with someone like Lu, right? Who is afraid of who? The next moment, hundreds of millions of Luzioki threw themselves into the fog copy. This scale was so large that even the boundless fog was washed out by him with ripples. Luzioki, who entered the dungeon, didn't say too much nonsense. He simply sensed it and rushed to the boss. "I'll take your life." Even in the face of all kinds of monsters that kept emerging, Luzioki just said lightly with his eyebrows opening and closing, "It's just a price tag to sell to soul." After saying this, he raised one hand and lowered it slightly, "Destroy." Countless monsters were like bubbles, annihilated in an instant. Luzioki directly used his natural ability to completely wipe out these monsters. This is erasure from a fundamental level. Once Luzioki kills him like this, he will never be resurrected again. Even a copy cannot reverse this result. Even more exaggerated is, when the number of monsters killed by Luzioki reached a certain level, the copy began to be unable to bear it anymore. It kept making deafening whines, but Luzioki never stopped. Immediately, the entire copy began to completely collapse and collapse. In the blink of an eye, Luzioki's clone appeared in reality. He was stunned for a moment, his eyes lit up, and he immediately informed all Luzioki of the news. After learning about this situation, everyone in Luzioki couldn't help but smile, and raised their hands in various spaces at the same time. "Annihilate! You trash!" When all Luzioki returned to their original bodies, Luzioki also felt that her soul had expanded to the extreme, and she almost wanted to explode. The door to the next realm has suddenly opened, revealing many supreme magic techniques to Luzioki, like a young woman soliciting customers on the street waving a handkerchief, and shouting to Luzioki delicately, "Uncle, come and play." But Luzioki held back. Because he knows that once he breaks through, this world can no longer accommodate myself. Although the feeling of holding in his urine was uncomfortable, he still had to endure it.